Amara had always been a girl with a quiet smile and gentle hands. She grew up in a small town where dreams were often limited to survival. Her family had very little, and from a young age, she knew that life would never hand her things easily. Her father had passed away when she was still a child, and her mother struggled to keep the household together. Money was always short, food was always simple, but her mother had a heart full of kindness. She often told Amara, "We may not have much, but we must never forget how to be kind to others." Those words stayed with her long after her mother passed away as well, leaving Amara alone with only a few belongings and one precious doll that had been her comfort since childhood. The doll wasn't special in appearance. Its dress was faded, its hair uneven, and one button eye was slightly loose. But for Amara, it was priceless. Whenever she had felt lonely, she hugged it close, and it reminded her of the warmth of her mother's lap. Even as she grew into adulthood, she kept the doll carefully wrapped in a piece of cloth, placing it at the corner of her small rented room. She never thought of it as just a toy, it was a memory, a reminder of love that had kept her going during the hardest times. Years passed, and Amara chose to become a nurse. She had always wanted to help people, and though the pay wasn't much, the work gave her a sense of purpose. She worked long hours in a busy city hospital, moving from one patient to another, sometimes skipping meals just to make sure every child was cared for. The hospital staff admired her dedication, even though she was often tired. She never complained, and her smile never faded. She wasn't rich, she didn't own beautiful clothes or fancy things, but she carried something far more valuable: compassion. One evening, as she was making her rounds in the pediatric ward, she noticed a little girl lying in one of the hospital beds. The girl was about 7 or 8 years old, thin and pale, her small hands clutching the blanket tightly. Unlike the other children, who had toys, books, or even visitors, this little one had nothing. Her eyes stared at the ceiling, blank and silent, and her lips barely moved. Amara felt her heart ache. She walked closer, speaking softly, "Hello, sweetheart. How are you feeling today?" The girl blinked but said nothing. Her eyes held a sadness that pierced Amara's soul. Over the next few days, Amara kept checking on her. She learned that the girl's name was Lily. The doctors said she was recovering from an illness, but her spirit seemed broken. She rarely smiled, rarely spoke, and whenever Amara tried to comfort her, she only turned away quietly. Amara realized that Lily wasn't just sick in her body, she was lonely. A child needed warmth, love, and little sparks of happiness to heal faster. But Lily's bed remained empty of toys or flowers. There were no giggles, no laughter, no parents staying by her side all day like the others. Amara began to wonder about her family. Who was she waiting for? Why was she so alone? One night after her shift, Amara sat in her room, staring at the little bundle wrapped in cloth, the doll her mother had given her. She held it in her hands, her fingers brushing against the worn fabric. Memories of her childhood came rushing back, nights of hunger when she hugged the doll to forget her stomach's emptiness, days of sadness when she whispered her secrets to it, times of loss when it was the only thing that reminded her she was not completely alone. She had never thought of parting with it. It was the last piece of her mother she still had. But now, as she thought of Lily's sad face, she wondered if this doll could bring comfort to someone else the way it had always comforted her. The decision wasn't easy. She held the doll close to her chest and even shed a few quiet tears. Giving it away felt like giving away her childhood, her last memory of home. But then she thought of Lily, a child who had nothing to hold, nothing to call her own in a strange hospital bed. With a heavy heart but a determined spirit, Amara decided that maybe love meant letting go. Maybe her mother would be proud if this doll brought happiness to another lonely soul. The next morning, she carefully washed the doll's dress and combed its messy hair with gentle fingers. It still looked old and imperfect, but to Amara, it looked beautiful. She wrapped it in a small cloth bag and carried it with her to the hospital. During her break, she walked into Lily's room. The girl was lying quietly, staring out of the window. Amara sat beside her and whispered, "I brought something for you." Lily turned her head slowly, her eyes tired and dull. Amara unwrapped the cloth and placed the doll in front of her. "This was mine when I was your age. I thought maybe you would like to have her." At first, Lily just stared at it, her small eyes blinking in surprise. She hesitated, as if she didn't believe it was meant for her. Then, slowly, she reached out her tiny hand and touched the doll's faded dress. Her lips parted slightly, and for the first time, a small smile appeared on her face. She pulled the doll closer, hugging it against her chest. Her voice was soft, almost like a whisper, but it carried a weight that made Amara's eyes fill with tears. "She's mine?" Lily asked. Amara nodded, smiling gently. "Yes, she's yours now. She will keep you company. She's very good at listening, you know." Something magical happened in that moment. The sadness in Lily's eyes softened. She held the doll tightly, as though afraid it might disappear. For the first time since she had been admitted, she looked at peace. Amara stayed with her a little longer, watching as Lily's small hands stroked the doll's hair again and again. It was such a simple thing, but to the child, it meant the world. And in that moment, Amara knew she had made the right choice. That night, as she walked back to her small room, Amara felt both lighter and lonelier. She no longer had her doll, the last memory of her mother. But strangely, she also felt proud. The doll's purpose had been fulfilled once again. It had comforted a child in need. She whispered to herself, "Mama, I gave it to someone who needed it more. I hope you're happy with me." A gentle calm filled her heart. Little did Amara know that this one small act of kindness, this selfless decision to give away her most precious possession, was about to change her life in ways she could never imagine. The little girl she had comforted wasn't just any child. Behind that hospital door, behind that lonely bed, there was a story waiting to unfold, one that would connect Amara's humble life with a world she had never dreamed of entering. The next morning in the hospital was busy as usual. Nurses hurried from room to room, doctors checked their patients, and the sound of machines beeped softly in the background. But when Amara walked into Lily's room, she noticed something different. The little girl, who had always looked silent and lost, was now sitting up in bed with the doll in her arms. Her pale cheeks seemed to have a little more color, and her lips curved into a faint smile as she whispered something to the doll. It was the first time Amara had ever seen her like this, and the sight warmed her heart. Amara walked closer and asked gently, "How are you today, Lily?" The girl looked up at her with brighter eyes than before. She hugged the doll tightly and said, "I told her my dreams last night. She listened to me." Amara smiled, kneeling beside her. "Yes, she's a very good listener. When I was small, I told her all my secrets, too. And she always kept them safe." Lily giggled softly, the sound fragile but sweet. It was the kind of sound that filled the room with hope. From that day on, the bond between Amara and Lily began to grow. Whenever Amara had a short break, she would stop by Lily's bed. Sometimes she would sit and tell stories about when she was little, about the silly things she did, and about how the doll had been her best friend. Lily listened carefully, her eyes wide with curiosity, as if each word painted a picture in her imagination. Other times, she would tell Amara about her favorite dreams of playing in big gardens, of having picnics with lots of friends, or of traveling to the beach and building sandcastles. With the doll in her arms, Lily finally began to talk. Amara noticed how quickly the atmosphere around Lily started to change. Before, the little girl rarely spoke, hardly touched her food, and kept herself hidden under the blanket. Now, she was eating better, smiling more often, and even asking questions about the world outside the hospital walls. The doctors noticed her progress and said she seemed stronger every day. They didn't know that part of the reason was not just medicine, but also the comfort of a faded old doll and the kindness of a nurse who treated her like family. But Amara never told anyone that the doll had been her only keepsake from her mother. She never wanted Lily to feel guilty for keeping it. To Amara, seeing the joy in Lily's face was worth more than anything. Every time she saw the child hold the doll close, she felt as though her mother's love was living on, touching another life. One afternoon, Amara found Lily trying to braid the doll's messy hair with her tiny fingers. She laughed softly and offered to help. Sitting beside her on the bed, Amara carefully separated the strands of yarn and tied them into little braids. Lily watched closely, fascinated. "You make it look so easy," she said with admiration. Amara replied, "That's because I had many years of practice. When I was your age, I used to brush her hair every night before I went to sleep." Lily smiled, then suddenly looked serious. "Why did you give her to me if she was yours? Didn't you love her?" The question touched Amara deeply. She looked into the girl's innocent eyes and answered softly, "I gave her to you because I love her. And I want her to keep you company, just like she kept me company when I was little. She was never meant to stay with me forever. She was meant to make someone else happy, too." Lily hugged the doll tighter and whispered, "I'll take care of her, I promise." Those words filled Amara's heart with quiet joy. She could see how much the doll already meant to Lily. It was no longer just a toy, it had become a bridge between two souls, one who had known loss and one who was still learning what love and comfort felt like. Days turned into weeks, and the change in Lily became clear to everyone. Other children in the ward noticed her doll and often came over to look at it. Lily proudly showed it to them, saying, "She's my best friend." Sometimes she even gave the doll a seat at her side during meals, pretending to feed her. For the first time, she was not the quiet child who stayed in the corner. She was laughing, talking, and playing, all because of a gift that had carried love from one life into another. Amara often watched from the doorway, smiling quietly to herself. She never expected that giving away something so small could make such a big difference. At night, though, when she returned to her lonely little room, she sometimes felt the emptiness of not having the doll by her side. She missed the comfort it once gave her, but she reminded herself that she had made the right choice. The doll was exactly where it was supposed to be, bringing light to a child who needed it more than she did. One evening, as she sat on her bed after another long shift, Amara thought about Lily's family. She had seen visitors come for other children, parents bringing flowers, siblings carrying toys, grandparents telling stories. But Lily's bed was always empty except for the doll. She had never seen anyone sit beside her for long. Sometimes a nurse or doctor mentioned that her father had visited briefly, but Amara had never seen him herself. She wondered who he was, what kind of man would leave such a sweet little girl so lonely. She didn't want to judge, but the thought often troubled her heart. She wished Lily had someone close to love her the way every child deserved. Still, Amara decided not to dwell too much on questions she couldn't answer. Her role was simple: to care for her patients with kindness and do what she could to ease their pain. And for Lily, that meant more than medicine. It meant giving her comfort, laughter, and something to hold on to when she felt afraid. One night, Amara found Lily asleep with the doll tucked under her arm, her small hand resting gently on its faded dress. There was a peaceful smile on her face, the kind that told Amara the child was dreaming sweet dreams. Amara stood by the bed quietly, whispering a silent prayer that the little girl would continue to heal and one day walk out of the hospital with her doll in her hands, ready to live a brighter life. What Amara didn't know was that the doll had not only given comfort to Lily, it had also caught the attention of someone else. Someone who would soon step into the picture and change everything. But for now, in the quiet halls of the hospital, it was simply a story of a poor nurse who had given away her most precious possession to a sick little girl. A story that was slowly weaving two lives together in ways neither of them could yet understand. The days at the hospital moved forward quietly, and for Lily, they became brighter with the doll in her arms and Amara by her side. But life has a way of changing suddenly, and one evening, as the golden glow of sunset filled the ward, the door opened, and someone unexpected stepped inside. Amara was sitting on the edge of Lily's bed, helping her color a picture with crayons that another nurse had brought. Lily was humming softly to the doll, placing it beside her as though it were watching too. When the tall figure walked in, both Amara and Lily looked up. The man was striking in appearance. He wore a dark tailored suit that looked far too formal for a hospital visit. His polished shoes clicked softly on the floor as he walked in. His face was handsome but serious, with sharp features and tired eyes that revealed he was used to long hours and heavy responsibilities. He carried an air of authority, the kind that made people step aside without being asked. But at that moment, he looked slightly out of place in the cheerful, colorful children's ward. "Daddy!" Lily's voice rang out with excitement. She sat up straighter, her eyes lighting up in a way Amara hadn't seen before. She reached out her arms eagerly, and the man's stern expression softened just a little as he moved forward and hugged his daughter carefully. Amara immediately realized who he was, the father who rarely visited, the man she had only heard about in whispers. So this was Lily's parent. For a moment, she felt relieved that Lily did have someone who cared enough to come, but at the same time, she sensed something distant in his manner. His hug was gentle, yet brief, as if he wasn't used to holding his own child for long. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" he asked in a voice that was deep but slightly rushed. "I'm better now, Daddy. Look." Lily proudly held up the doll. "She's mine. Nurse Amara gave her to me. Isn't she pretty?" The man's eyes shifted to the doll, then to Amara. His gaze was sharp, and Amara suddenly felt nervous under it. For a second, she worried he might be upset that she had given his daughter something personal. She stood politely, her hands folded, waiting for his response. "You gave her this?" he asked, his tone calm but carrying a hint of question. "Yes, sir," Amara answered respectfully. "It was my own doll from childhood. I thought Lily might like to have it for company." There was a brief silence, and Amara felt her heart beat faster. She thought he might scold her or see it as unprofessional. But before he could speak, Lily hugged the doll tightly and said with a smile, "She makes me happy, Daddy. She listens to me at night when I'm lonely." Hearing those innocent words, the man's expression changed. The tension in his eyes softened, and for the first time, Amara saw something behind his stern look, a glimpse of guilt, perhaps, or sadness. He nodded slightly and said, "I see. Thank you." His voice was quieter this time, less commanding. Amara gave a small nod in return, relieved. She excused herself to let father and daughter spend time together, but as she stepped outside the room, her thoughts were unsettled. There was something about him that felt heavy, as though he carried burdens far deeper than the suit and tie suggested. Later that evening, Amara returned to check on Lily before her shift ended. She noticed the father was still there, sitting in a chair by the bed, his phone in one hand but his eyes drifting often to his daughter. He seemed restless, torn between work and the child in front of him. Lily, on the other hand, looked happier than ever, proudly showing him the doll, telling him stories, and giggling in a way Amara had rarely seen. It was clear that Lily adored her father, even if he wasn't around as much as she needed. As Amara adjusted Lily's blanket, the man glanced at her and asked, "You take care of her often?" "Yes, sir," Amara replied softly. "She is a very sweet child." He gave a small nod, but his eyes studied her quietly, as though he was trying to understand something about her. After a pause, he said, "I'm Adrian Carter." The name struck Amara. She had heard it before. Adrian Carter was a powerful name in the city, one of the wealthiest businessmen, known for running a large company with hundreds of employees. She had seen his face in newspapers and magazines, though never expected to meet him here, in the children's ward. For a moment, she was speechless, then quickly responded, "It's an honor to meet you, sir." But Adrian didn't look like a man who enjoyed his fame. He looked tired, weary, as if success had cost him something precious. His eyes softened only when they rested on Lily, who was still playing with the doll, humming happily. As the days went by, Adrian began to appear more often at the hospital. He always wore fine suits, always carried his phone, but each time he stayed a little longer by Lily's side. Amara noticed that while he clearly loved his daughter, he didn't always know how to show it. He was awkward when she asked him to play, uncomfortable when she tried to share her little secrets. It wasn't that he didn't care, his eyes showed deep love, but he seemed like a man who had forgotten how to slow down and simply be a father. Amara, on the other hand, had an ease with Lily that Adrian quietly observed. She listened patiently, laughed at the girl's jokes, braided the doll's hair, and encouraged her to eat properly. She treated Lily not as a patient, but as if she were her own child. Adrian saw how his daughter's eyes sparkled whenever Amara entered the room, how she seemed brighter, stronger, and more alive. It made him realize something he hadn't wanted to admit, that his busy life had left his daughter starved for attention. One evening, after Lily had fallen asleep with the doll tucked under her arm, Adrian found Amara tidying the room. He stood by the window, his voice low as he spoke. "She smiles more now. I haven't seen her like this in a long time." Amara paused, then answered gently, "Children need love and company as much as medicine. Sometimes even more." Her words were simple, but they struck him deeply. He didn't reply immediately. Instead, he looked at his daughter, a small figure resting peacefully, and for the first time, he felt the weight of all the moments he had missed. He realized he had been providing her everything money could buy, but not the one thing she truly longed for: his presence. Amara didn't know it yet, but her kindness had begun to change something inside him. Adrian Carter, the man the world admired as a successful CEO, was now just a father, learning quietly from a poor nurse who had given away her only treasure without expecting anything in return. The hospital had become like a second home for Lily. With her doll always in her arms and Amara by her side, she had begun to bloom like a flower finally touched by sunlight. She laughed more often, asked endless questions, and even made friends with some of the other children in the ward. But behind all that joy, Amara could still see a shadow. Lily was happiest when her father visited, but his visits were still short and filled with distraction. Adrian often came in the evenings after work, dressed in his fine suits, carrying his phone that buzzed constantly with messages and calls. He tried to focus on Lily, but his mind always seemed pulled somewhere else. Whenever Lily told him about her dreams, about the little things she wanted to do once she was better, his smile was gentle but distracted, as though part of him wasn't really there. Still, Amara noticed he was trying more than before. Perhaps something inside him was changing, even if slowly. One day, while Adrian sat beside his daughter's bed, Amara walked in with Lily's meal tray. She smiled at the girl and said, "Here we go, Lily. You need to eat all of this to get stronger." Lily made a face and said, "But I don't like the soup." Amara laughed softly. "I didn't like it either when I was your age. But I ate it because I knew it would help me grow. Do you want me to feed you?" Lily nodded and opened her mouth like a little bird waiting for food. Amara patiently fed her spoon by spoon, joking in between, until Lily finally finished half the bowl. Adrian watched quietly. He had never seen someone handle his daughter with so much patience and love. When Lily was done, she leaned against her pillow, clutching her doll. Amara wiped her mouth gently, then tucked the blanket around her. Adrian's eyes followed every movement. When Amara stepped back, he said in a low voice, "you do more for her than I do." Amaro looked at him in surprise. "That's not true, sir. You are her father. Nothing can take your place in her heart." But Adrian shook his head slightly. "I've given her everything except time. I don't even know her favorite color. Or what makes her laugh the most. And here you are, knowing exactly how to make her eat her food without fuss." His voice carried regret, and for a moment, Amara saw not the strong CEO but a man weighed down by his own choices. Amara hesitated, then said softly, "Children don't need much. They just need someone to listen, to sit with them, to show them they matter. It's never too late to give her that." Her words touched him more than she realized. He didn't reply, but that night, as he sat beside Lily while she slept, he kept thinking about what Amara had said. Over the next few days, Adrian began to make small changes. He silenced his phone more often when he was with Lily. He asked her questions about her doll, about the stories Amara told her, about her favorite games. At first, he was awkward, unsure how to talk to a child, but Lily's excitement gave him courage. She giggled when he tried to braid the doll's yarn hair and laughed when he made funny faces to cheer her up. Slowly, Adrian was rediscovering how to be a father, and it showed in the way Lily's eyes sparkled whenever he entered the room. Amara noticed this transformation quietly. She didn't say anything, but in her heart, she felt glad. It was clear that Adrian loved his daughter deeply. He just needed to be reminded of how important his presence was. One afternoon, while Adrian was away, Lily asked Amara, "Do you have a daddy?" The question came so suddenly that Amara froze for a moment. She smiled faintly and shook her head. "No, my father passed away when I was little." Lily's face softened. "So you were like me? You felt lonely too?" "Yes," Amara admitted gently. "But I had my mama, and I had this doll. They kept me strong. And now you have her too. She'll always remind you that you are not alone." Lily hugged the doll tightly and said, "And I have you. You're like family to me." Those words filled Amara's heart with warmth. She hadn't realized how much she meant to Lily until that moment. For a child who had everything money could buy, it wasn't wealth or gifts that mattered most, it was love. Adrian soon began to notice something else too. He saw how tired Amara looked after her long shifts, how her shoes were worn out, how she skipped her own meals just to make sure every child in the ward was comfortable. He even overheard another nurse whispering that Amara often stayed longer than required because she couldn't bring herself to leave the children alone. She worked tirelessly, not for money, but for the simple wish to make others feel cared for. One evening, when Lily was asleep, Adrian found Amara in the hospital cafeteria, sipping tea from a paper cup. She looked exhausted, her shoulders drooping, her eyes heavy with fatigue. He walked over and asked, "Do you ever rest?" Amara looked up, surprised to see him there. She gave a small smile. "There's always work to be done. Children need care day and night." "But who takes care of you?" he asked quietly. The question made her pause. She lowered her eyes, unsure how to answer. After a moment, she said, "I take care of myself the best I can. I don't need much. As long as I can help others, I'm fine." Adrian studied her carefully. He realized she wasn't just saying it out of modesty, it was the truth. She really lived a simple life, putting others before herself. Something about that moved him deeply. He was a man surrounded by wealth, by people eager to please him, yet here was a woman who gave away her most precious possession without hesitation, who lived with so little yet gave so much. That night, when Adrian returned home to his large, empty house, he couldn't stop thinking about Amara. He thought about the worn shoes she walked in, the tired eyes that still managed to shine with kindness, and the doll she had parted with just to make his daughter smile. He felt a stirring in his heart, something unfamiliar yet powerful, a mixture of admiration, respect, and gratitude. For the first time in years, Adrian began questioning his own life. He had spent so long building his empire, running after success, that he had almost lost sight of what truly mattered. Seeing Amara, a woman with nothing but compassion, reminded him that life's greatest treasures couldn't be measured in money. They were found in moments of love, kindness, and sacrifice. The more time he spent at the hospital, the more he saw how much Amara had given to his daughter. And though he hadn't said it out loud yet, he began to feel that he owed her more than just a thank you. Lily's recovery was slow but steady. Each day she grew stronger, her laughter becoming more frequent, her cheeks slowly filling with the healthy glow of childhood. The doll never left her side. She carried it to her check UPS, held it while she ate, and even kept it on her pillow when she slept. For Lily, it wasn't just a doll anymore, it was her friend, her comfort, her symbol of love. Amara watched with quiet joy. The sacrifice she had made felt lighter every day, because it had brought so much happiness to the little girl. Whenever she saw Lily giggle and talk to the doll as if it could answer back, she felt her mother's memory live on in the most beautiful way. Adrian, too, had changed. His visits grew longer, his phone stayed silent more often, and his attention was finally where it should have been, on his daughter. He was learning, slowly but surely, to be present, to laugh, to listen, and to simply enjoy the gift of fatherhood. Amara often caught him smiling at Lily in a way that spoke volumes of love, a kind of smile she imagined the world rarely got to see from a man like him. One evening, as the sun painted the hospital windows gold, Lily tugged at her father's sleeve. "Daddy, do you know why this doll is so special?" she asked. Adrian glanced at her, curious. "Because Nurse Amara gave it to you." "Yes," Lily nodded seriously. "But also because she gave me her only doll. She told me she had it since she was little. Can you believe she gave me her only one?" Adrian's heart tightened. He looked over at Amara, who was tidying Lily's table with a soft smile, pretending she hadn't heard. But he had. And for the first time, the full weight of her sacrifice sank into him. It wasn't just kindness, it was selflessness of the purest kind. That night, after Lily fell asleep clutching the doll, Adrian asked Amara to step outside the room for a moment. She followed him quietly into the corridor, where the lights were dim and the air carried the hushed calm of night. "Why did you give it to her?" Adrian asked softly, his voice filled with genuine curiosity. Amara looked down, her hands folded in front of her. "Because she needed it more than I did. It was the last gift from my mother. I kept it all these years, but I thought, maybe it could bring Lily the same comfort it once gave me. I couldn't stand seeing her so lonely." Her words pierced Adrian's heart. He stared at her, amazed at the simplicity with which she spoke about something so profound. To give away the only memory of her late mother, he couldn't imagine such a sacrifice. Most people clung tightly to their treasures, yet she had let go without hesitation, just to bring joy to his daughter. "You don't realize what you've done," he said quietly. "You've given her more than a doll. You've given her light, hope, and love. Something I should have given her myself." Amara shook her head gently. "No, sir. She loves you more than anything. All she wants is your time." The doll only filled a little emptiness until you could. Adrian didn't reply right away. He just stood there, looking at her with new eyes, eyes that no longer saw just a nurse, but a woman whose heart was richer than any fortune he had ever earned. Days turned into weeks, and Lily was finally declared healthy enough to leave the hospital. The ward felt both joyful and bittersweet. Nurses and doctors came to wish her well, giving her balloons and hugs. Amara stood quietly at the back, her eyes misty but filled with pride. She had watched Lily transform from a silent, lonely child into a lively, glowing girl, and now it was time to see her go. On the morning of discharge, Lily held her doll tightly, refusing to put it down even when the nurse tried to help her change clothes. She clutched it all the way to the car where Adrian was waiting. Before stepping inside, she ran back to Amara and hugged her tightly. "I'll never forget you," she whispered. "And I'll never forget what you gave me." Amara hugged her back, her throat tight with emotion. "Be strong, Lily. And take care of her. She'll always remind you that you're loved." When Lily finally left with her father, Amara stood by the hospital door, watching until the car disappeared. Her chest felt heavy with both sadness and peace. She had given away her most precious possession, but in return, she had gained something greater: the love of a child and the knowledge that her small act had changed two lives. But life had another surprise waiting. A week later, after her long night shift, Amara returned to her small rented room. On the doorstep, she found a package wrapped neatly in golden paper. Confused, she picked it up and carried it inside. When she opened it, her breath caught in her throat. Inside was a beautiful doll, brand new, dressed in a gown of soft silk, with bright eyes that seemed to sparkle. It wasn't just any doll, it looked like a doll made with great care, one that resembled the faded one she had given away. Along with it was a small handwritten note. "Some gifts are too precious to be forgotten. You gave away your only treasure to make my daughter smile. This is not to replace what you lost, but to remind you that kindness never goes unnoticed. Thank you for everything." Adrian Carter. Amara sat on her bed, holding the doll, tears filling her eyes. She wasn't used to receiving gifts. She wasn't used to being noticed at all. Yet here was something thoughtful, not because it was expensive, but because it showed he had understood her heart. From that day forward, Adrian and Lily visited the hospital often, even when Lily no longer needed treatment. Sometimes they came just to say hello, sometimes to bring small gifts for the other children in the ward. Adrian, once known only as a busy CEO, began to change in the eyes of those who saw him. He smiled more, he laughed with his daughter, and he seemed to carry a lighter heart. As for Amara, she continued her work, still humble, still giving her all to her patients. But now, she carried with her not just the memory of her old doll, but also the knowledge that kindness had built a bridge between two very different worlds: a poor nurse and a wealthy businessman, both united by the love for one little girl. In the end, it wasn't wealth, power, or status that made the difference. It was a small, selfless act: a faded doll placed in the arms of a lonely child that changed everything. Amara had given away her only treasure, not knowing it would lead her to touch the lives of a father and daughter who needed her more than they realized. And as Lily grew stronger, as Adrian learned to balance his role as both a leader and a father, Amara quietly smiled from the sidelines, knowing that sometimes, the smallest gifts carry the greatest power.